Welcome to the Contrarians and welcome to a Patreon subscriber suggested topic. The topic tonight, best album by a band member who left a big band in their prime. Now, if you're watching the Contrarians, there are links below to our Patreon, our Ko-fi. If you want to join on these discussions, do you like the content? We'd be glad to have you, and check out the links below. What I'm going to do is just, I want to welcome to the panel. Welcome everybody. Glad that you're here tonight. And we're just going to go around and we'll go around. We're going to try to keep it to an hour. And, I think I'm just going to go clockwise. So I'm going to go Reed, Uncle Meat, Joe, and then Rand. And we're just going to wing it. Hopefully have a good discussion. Like I said, the topic tonight, best album by a band member who left a big band in their prime. So let's start off with Reed. Welcome, Reed. How are you tonight?
I'm doing great.
Excellent.
Grant, how are you tonight?
Excellent. Top notch.
All right. So I presume we're actually going to go through several. So I wanted to start out with a kind of non-obvious topic, something that I thought no one else would pick, and it's a twofer. So the band that I have selected is Dokken. And the members who went off to do their own thing are George Lynch and Jeff Pilson. So the story, I may get it a little muddied. I make no apologies for this, people. I'm not an encyclopedia. I'm just a music fan. But the band more or less fell apart during the Monsters of Rock tour with Van Halen. I have read interviews with George Lynch where he said basically this is when the record company came through with a big deal and Don Dokken took all the money. And this was just before the tour started. So they did that entire tour with, George standing with his back to the audience. They didn't when I saw them, but that was it's something I heard about at other shows. And they've been angry about it ever since. And I think it's a good cautionary tale. If you're a musician, don't join a band named after another person. I mean, unless you are that person, you're just going to get screwed. So, of course, George goes off and he starts a career of other projects with a little thing here called Lynch Mob Wicked Sensation, which is a great hard rock album. Now, it was moderately successful. It was too hard really to compete with the hair metal, and it came out just before grunge came out and kind of swept that area of music clean anyway. So I don't know that his timing was really good, but it was pretty successful. And after that, George went on to put out a string of albums, both under the Lynch Mob name. I know he's changed that now. Things that seemed culturally palatable 34 years ago no longer make the cut. I won't comment any further on that. I can't remember what his current touring unit is. But he's done Wicked Sensation. He's done KXM with Ray Luzier and the bass player from King's X. Oh, I can't believe I forgot. Doug Pennick. Sheesh, with Doug Pennick. Done In Machine. He's done Tooth and Nail. Again with Pilson. He's done the Lynch Pilson project. He and Jeff Pilson end up together on a lot of stuff. They make a lot of great music. I will say, I always say bands are a type of alchemy. What you get out of a band is more than just the pieces. Lynch had the riffs, he had the solos. A lot of times you have Jeff Pilson contributing. He sings backup. He, in fact, is a fantastic vocalist on his own. But without the full band, it was just never quite the same. And even the T&N or Tooth and Nail project is not really quite as good as a full Dokken album. But it's all still good stuff. But I wanted to bring these guys up because a lot of people are not aware that Jeff Pilson put out music on his own. And if you've never checked out this record, let's see if you can read that through the glare there. That is War and Peace. Not widely distributed. The album is actually called The Walls Have Eyes. And it is a fantastic fantastic slice of hard rock. Jeff sings, he plays guitar, he plays bass, he has a couple of guest musicians, but mostly it's him. And he's amazing. The songwriting is amazing. Let me tell you, his voice is fantastic. It is way better than Don Dokken ever sounded. If I had only heard this album and then heard a Dokken album, I would say, you know what, Don's the least important member of that band. Although, again, none of the other stuff really has quite the punch that the full Dokken lineup has. But at the end of this, Pilson does an a cappella version of Walk Away. It's just Jeff singing into the mic with no instrumental accompaniment, and it's phenomenal. Don Dokken would never put himself out like that because he needs keyboards and other things to support his high notes. So War and Peace, The Walls Have Eyes. If you've never listened to it and you like late 80s hard rock, check it out. It's an amazing album. And George Lynch has put out too many projects for me to name them all. But there you go. Lynch and Pilson.
It looks like War and Peace that came out in 2004, only in Europe.
That may have been.
No,
I guess it's possible.
Surprised. Yeah, but there's some for sale on Discogs. I'm just saying, but they're all in Europe.
Well worth checking out. I'm not even sure where I acquired it, but things are easy to get with the internet. Also, there is a collaboration between Lynch that's just called Lynch Pilson, and it is also amazing.
Excellent choice. All right, Reed, thanks a lot. Uncle Meat, you're up.
Okay, well, I'm guessing, I definitely concentrated on one album. The second that I heard the topic, one album came to mind, and it's definitely from a big band because you don't get any bigger than Led Zeppelin. And I am not necessarily, what you would call a huge Zeppelin fan. I'm a big Zeppelin fan in general, but not one of my favorite bands, and they never have been. But when Robert Plant, I came out with Pictures at 11. I remember liking it, and at the time it was like, okay, well, this is good. But when he came out with this, 1983, it's funny because I actually remember buying that on vinyl and Metal Health by Quiet Riot at the same time, which just seems like an odd mix. And it's funny about this album is that basically when I started watching stuff like the Contrarians and Sea of Tranquility, I got into it. It was a huge like Thanksgiving time for me during the pandemic because it really just, I was a big influence. And then it turned out a show that we were doing, I called the LeBrain Train that my friend was doing. I was getting a chance to meet Martin on there. And 3 days before that, I saw him do the ranking of the albums of Robert Plant. And I remember watching it, thinking, okay, it's going to be, like everybody says, it's going to be Pictures at 11. And I remember that when he got to number 2 and Pictures at 11, like, I was almost like, finally, because every person that I'd ever talked to had always said, it's no Pictures at 11. And I'm like, no, I just don't agree. And it was really kind of even more exciting to meet him, like to be able to talk to somebody else who actually got it. I love the album. I really think that Phil Collins' drumming has a lot to do with it, even though he's only on 5 songs. Barrymore Barlow from Jethro Tull's on 2, and a drum machine for Big Love. And I there's something special going on there with his drumming. And Paul Martinez playing bass, who is known to play bass for the Pace Ashton Lord band, and I love that album as well. But the real big story for me in there is Robbie Blunt. I honestly think the guitar work that is happening on the Principal Moments is some of the greatest guitar work I've ever heard. And something that Martin said during his thing, I have to copy because I couldn't agree more. He said that he thought that the guitar work on the Principal Moments is better than Jimmy Page has ever done. And I honestly, after what I enjoy, I totally believe that. I've always found Jimmy Page to be kind of sloppy, and a lot of people love that, and that's great that they love it. At times, I love it too, but the cleanness and the tasty leads of Robbie Blunt is just, to me, it's just outstanding stuff. Stuff like I threw it the two-step, a big log, and of course In the Mood. It's just full of him shining on the whole album, and it's very strange because I tried to go back and do a little shaking of I do a little of shaken and stirred, and I couldn't last through even one full song of any of it. It was completely different. It was like more Harold Faltermeyer than it was like rock. It was just not cool. And it's amazing to me that like how much I still love that album. It's a top 10, 20 album for me. And I think it's like one of the best solo albums of all time.
Well, you do have to admit, Little by Little is brilliant, though.
Yes,
stirred.
Yes, I do. I do know that song, and there's some other stuff too that I like, but I just don't think he ever really found something totally original, like until he did that album. And it's not surprising that he didn't tour Pictures at 11. He waited. He was so against playing Zeppelin that he needed more songs to play to actually tour, and it would have been amazing to see that tour with Phil Collins on drums.
Yeah, those first two Robert Plant solo albums are brilliant. I love them. I never get tired of listening to them. But excellent choice, Uncle Meat.
Thank you.
Joe B, what you got?
All right. So when I first heard of this topic, I immediately David Lee Roth, right? But that's too obvious. He's going to be my honorable mention. My pick is going to be very centric to the city of Chicago where I grew up, and it's Michael Schenker leaving UFO. Now, UFO on a national basis wasn't huge, but in Chicago, they were a platinum band. They sold out multiple nights at the amphitheater. They recorded part of that amazing Strangers in the Night live album there. So, and there's three sources out there, reading sources out there that says they were on the cusp of becoming like AC/DC if Schenker would have stayed in the band. But he leaves. He just says, Rod Nevison doesn't even know. He's like, I don't like the sound in this song. He walked out and they never see him again. So Schenker leads UFO. They come out with, I like the Paul Chapman era a lot, but I'm telling you, where I grew up, those were fighting. If you said you like Paul Chapman more than Michael Schenker, you might get the shit kicked out of you. Honestly, they're Michael Schenker guys. When they played the amphitheater, supporting the live album without Michael Schenker, people were throwing stuff at Paul Chapman. So Michael Schenker comes out with two amazing. I mean, his whole solo career is great, but I love those first two albums. The first Michael Schenker group with Armed and Ready, but that second one with MSG, that's basically a super group for me. He gets Paul Raymond from UFO to rejoin him, and Cozy Powell on drums, just amazing stuff. So those two first albums are just great, and that's my pick. I mean, UFO, I'm telling you, so we had Obsession and Lights Out. They were getting played constantly, and I talked to Martin when he wrote the UFO book, because I said, we thought they were on the same level as Rush, and we thought they were on the same level as Led Zeppelin. They were getting played so much in Chicago, and they were that big. So to us, they were a platinum huge act in the city of Chicago. So but I'm telling you, when he left UFO, it was like, what's happening here? And people were freaking out. And I almost got into a fight. I got into a fight with a guy at a radio station I worked at. He was from Chicago as well. I worked at a radio station at the University of Iowa. And I told him I liked the Chapman stuff just as much, not more than the Schenker stuff, just as much. And he wanted to go. I'm like, dude, just slow down. It's music, you know. But yeah, so my pick is Michael Schenker for sure. And he left the band right when they were at the cusp of possibly becoming huge, and went on to do a solo career. And he's had his ups and downs and trials and tribulations with his own personal life. He's had some amazing shows, some not so amazing shows, but he's a legend, and that's my pick.
Excellent pick. Makes me wonder though, what if that next album after Help Me, what was the last album? Not the live
No
album.
Place to Run.
Nope. Yeah. What would have No Place to Run been like had he been on?
I don't know. I mean, you read, I read Pete Way's book, and I heard Rod Nevison speak. I mean, I heard a couple sources say they are on the cusp. I mean, according to Ross Halpern, the photographer said, you know, if Schenker would have stayed in the band and Phil Mogg would have stayed away from the Bruce Springsteen lyrics, they would have been huge. But Schenker didn't write any lyrics on that album. Not lyrics, but any of the tracks, did he? He's not a co-writer on it. No, not on No Place to Run, no.
Yeah, he was long gone.
Yeah, he was, which is one UFO Paul Chapman song, ironically. But yeah.
Good choice. Excellent. Mr. Kelly.
Joe B., were you surprised to see Michael Schenker end up on Scorpions' Love Drive?
Yeah, that was weird too, because we saw one of their first American shows at Chicago Fest. And when Francis Buchholz came out, we thought it was Michael Schenker because he had the big long, we didn't know if he would be there or not. He didn't have the internet or anything else. And we're like, is that Schenker? Right. It took us like 3-4 songs to realize that was the bass player. But yeah, and then now there's a huge rift between the Schenker brothers because because he said after that album, Rudolph ripped off his sound now, and they don't talk to each other. We did a super group.
We did.
I said I had to get a psychiatrist to put mine together because I was putting the Schenker brothers back together. But yeah,
they
that was a good one.
They contracted that disease that destroyed Ray Davis and Dave Davis and John Fogerty and Tom Fogerty.
Right,
and the brothers that just can't get along.
And the Gallagher brothers, yeah.
It's crazy.
Or the guys from the Black Crows.
Yeah.
Oh,
but they're out. I think they're out touring now. Yeah, they're back.
They're out touring. Yeah,
they hate each other.
Our friend in Australia is going to be seeing them in a couple of weeks, I think. So
you know, Reed, I saw that Monsters of Rock tour in San Francisco, and I missed Dawkins' set. You know why? I went down to get hot dogs for everybody, and the line was so long, I missed the entire Dawkins set.
Holy crap!
I never got to see him. It was so crowded.
So yeah, on Dawkins, I saw him open up
Candlestick Park, right? It was the last.
I saw him at the Monsters of Rock at Alpine Valley. I think that might have been the first or second show on that tour. And then I saw him open up for Aerosmith. I just remember George Lynch's guitar drowning out the rest of the band. And then they shortly broke up after that. And then Jeff Pilson, of course, has now played a big role in The Foreigner.
Yeah.
Right.
And he recorded with Dio. And
right.
I mean, Pilson's a talent, man.
But
he's an underrated talent.
Jeff's been in Foreigner, what, 12, 15 years probably now? Long time.
I was there with my kid. I took him to the concert. He was 14, I think. But anyways, he was just like over the top, like happy. And Metallica had a really weird sound at that concert because of the San Francisco winds and Candlestick. They're swirling around real bad right there. And the whole band sounded like they were going through an organ, Leslie. And it was just so freaking weird. But I was there for Eddie Van Halen, and you know, you could see him. He was about this tall, you know, about that tall. We were way up in the nosebleed seats and stuff, but it was fun. I was happy to do it. And then Candlestick Park got destroyed right after that concert. Anyways, moving right along. So I took the thing as literal as it says best album by a band member that left a band in their prime. So to me, this is the best album, even though basically he was in the band when the album came out. But still, the way I read it, I'll just say this. Steve Hackett, Voyage of the Acolyte. Freaking
It's a good
unbelievable
choice.
album, so good. 3 members of Genesis are on here. Phil Collins does all the drumming. Mike Rutherford does the bass playing and some rhythm guitar. And Steve Hackett, to me, you know, I've got like 30 Steve Hackett CDs, and this is my favorite still from 1975. This is such a good album. The artwork on this is from his ex-wife Kim, and if I can find that centerfold, oh, look at this. She's really good, Kim Poor. But anyways, yeah, that's, I mean, you know, if you're into prog and you don't own that, why?
I've
Where
got
you
it.
been?
I've got
Yeah, it's so good. It just plays and sounds like a long lost Genesis, excuse me, album. And it's, to me, it's more progressive than A Trick of the Tail. Steve certainly
that's a
gets
great
to
album.
play.
Yeah,
on
I
it.
can see that. Yeah.
Steve certainly gets to play on it more because it's his thing. But I just think it's fantastic.
Cool. Excellent
That's a
choice.
great pick. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wouldn't. That's a really great pick. Didn't even pop into my head.
Really good.
All right. Reed, you've got another one up your sleeve?
Are
Aren't
you
you
not going to
gonna-
throw in one of
You're
your
not
own?
going to go,
I don't
Brandon?
I'm just hosting this. I
Okay.
don't have anything.
Okay, so
I
you're
thought
just
maybe I
host-
could rally, but I'm going to be like Nick and I'm just going to host
Okay.
All
and
right.
enjoy
Well,
myself.
there are several. I mean, obviously, a lot of big names came to mind. I wanted to try and avoid people who were fired from bands and then went on to do other stuff, but people who voluntarily left. And while there are a lot of people who have, had, as they say, creative differences or just wanted to stretch out, or I think even sometimes you get a little self-sabotage, but one of my all-time favorite artists is a little man you may be familiar with by the name of Bruce Dickinson. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't exactly say that Bruce left at the height of Maiden's popularity, because by the time Fear of the Dark came out, it was the 90s. Now, they were still selling records, but they weren't nearly as popular as they were in the mid to late 80s. And of course, they were just about to hit that early 90s metal slump in the United States. And of course, Maiden then started looking at South America and Eastern Europe as the growth markets, and that turned out to be a wonderful move on their part. But nonetheless, Bruce just went through this thing. By the way, if you've never read his book, What Does This Button Do? Bruce is a pretty fascinating guy, and he's a great storyteller, but he's restless. He has a restless intellect, and he's one of these guys that was going, this gig is too safe. Do people just like me because I'm in Iron Maiden? By the way, the answer is yes. But that doesn't mean that he can't do music on his own. So he goes out and records an entire album. He had done a solo album while he was with Maiden, Tattooed Millionaire. It has a few good tracks on it. But this is his Balls to Picasso is his first solo album after Maiden, and it's his actually second fully recorded album. He recorded an entire album with Keith Olsen and then basically threw it away. It's been released as extra tracks on reissues, but he got this entire album together, decided, he wanted to, as he says, do a spooky Peter Gabriel kind of vibe. It would have been commercial suicide because it's not what people want from Bruce Dickinson, right? So he hooks up with Roy Z and the Tribe of Gypsies, and he comes out with Balls to Picasso. While I happen to like Balls to Picasso, this was also commercial suicide because it's not a heavy metal album. It has some hard rock. It has some metal leaning songs, but it is not Iron Maiden. And I know that that's what Bruce wanted, was to be not Iron Maiden. But, if you're, I keep using this analogy, but if you're Coke and you suddenly start tasting like Pepsi, you're going to piss off a few people, right? And a lot of people were not receptive to that. So he said, fine, I'll put out a grunge album. And he comes out with Skunk Works. And I love this CD. It may be my favorite Bruce Dickinson product, but I didn't like it when it came out. It took me 10 years to warm up to this album. This is probably #1 on my list of albums that I grew to love over time, because I put it in and listened to it. I didn't listen to it again for 6 years. I hated it so much. And then I didn't pay attention to his career for a while until I read reviews of a little album called Accident of Birth. And I was skeptical of Accident of Birth because he got back with Roy Z, who was the same guy who was responsible for Balls to Picasso. Well, turns out Roy Z actually does classic metal as good as anybody on the planet. And Accident of Birth is a phenomenal record. And it is exactly what people wanted from Bruce Dickinson. And now I can't help it but think if he had done that as his first album, he would have just taken all of Maiden's fans, because Maiden was lost at sea without Bruce. When you've got nobody to roughen Steve Harris's worst impulses, you get complete albums of Steve Harris. And that is, even as a massive Maiden fan, it's a little tedious, right? But Accident of Birth, killer from start to finish. And then most people will say that The Chemical Wedding is actually Bruce's best album. I like Skunk Works better these days, but when it came out, I would have agreed. The vocals, Bruce never sang better on any recorded album than on The Chemical Wedding. It supposedly has a through line about alchemy. I'm a nerd, but I don't know enough about alchemy to know how accurate that is. Bruce has a degree in literature. I have a degree in general studies. It's a different thing. But nonetheless, Bruce Dickinson went on to put out fabulous music at a time when Maiden was really faltering. And then I think that allowed him, he was riding a wave up when he rejoined Maiden. And that is exactly the trajectory that those two entities needed to get together and put out Brave New World, which I love. Brave New World.
Let's not forget, him getting back with Adrian Smith too.
Yes, indeed.
I mean, so at that time, we're like, he's just as Maiden as Maiden at this point, with members.
And I could have brought out Psycho Motel. I love Psycho Motel, which are the grunge albums that Adrian Smith did. They sound very much like Stone Temple Pilots, if you consider Stone Temple Pilots grunge, and not everyone does because they're not from Seattle. But also, once again, here's a guy who's like, I want to try something different. And he tries something different. No one likes it. Well, it's good. It's just, it's not Maiden-esque. So when he and Bruce get back together, they put out great music.
Cool.
True story. I was with a friend last night, and I happened to mention that I was doing this tonight, and I told him the topic, and within 10 seconds he said, "Definitely Chemical Wedding." It's like out of nowhere. So
well, there you go.
I'm not surprised to hear it.
All right. Thank you, Reed. That was great. Uncle Meat, I'm passing it over to you.
Well, I'm just gonna rifle off a few honorable mentions that I had. Ones that were close. The closest one that I did to being the one that I talked more about was a Kim Mitchell, the Akimbo logo album. Again, like most of the honorable mentions, like it's technically his second album, but after the brilliant EP, but Akimbo logo is an incredible album and one of my favorites. Joe Walsh, The Smoker You Get, The Player You Drink. Again, that's his second album, technically, but just a great showing after being in the James Gang. I've been recently getting into a lot of James Gang, so it definitely came to mind. Mm-hmm. And my favorite musician, Steve Morse, the album High Tension Wires is definitely there. Technically, again, it's a second album, but I love that album to death. And I can't not say one of my favorite albums as well, with good old Derek William Dick, Mr. Fish, a vigil in a wilderness of mirrors. I still love. I will always love. And that's pretty much it.
I was that close to bringing that out, and I'm glad I didn't.
Well, it is a wondrous album. To me, it's
Oh,
on
I
par.
love
It's on par with Season's End.
I like it way better because I am not a big Hogarth fan.
Really?
I'm not either, but I do like that album a lot. But there's less annoyances on Vigil. As a matter of fact, there's almost none. But there's definitely some questions to be asked after Season's End. Let's just say that.
Oh yeah. Sure.
Super. Excellent. Excellent. All right, Joe, what you got?
So I'm going to go with my original first pick, and this was massive
well.
music news. David Lee Roth, and it was such a weird time because I mean they come off in 1984, they're gigantic, and then you're like, what's happening? And then you get, Eddie's playing with Sammy at Farm Aid. Is Dave still in the band? There's some verbal, you really don't know, and that's the whole weirdness about Van Halen in general, even up to Eddie Van Halen passing away. You really didn't know what actually was happening with the band. They kept a lot of things secret. But next thing you know, 5150 comes out, and it's, to me, I thought it was a good album. That what really angered me was when I saw them live and they really didn't play any Van Halen songs. They open up with, they play a lot more Sammy Hagar solo. So it wasn't for me. But Eat 'Em and Smile, I think is just a great album, and I think it's better than any Van Hagar album. And but it was so strange that this band is at their apex, number one hit with Jump, and their lead singer just goes off and goes solo. So that doesn't get any bigger than that music wise. My second one isn't as big, but I got an interesting story about it. It's Fast Eddie Clarke leaving Motorhead. So when I heard Ace of Spades and then No Sleep Till Hammersmith, I was like, a band didn't affect me that much since I first heard Kiss, which got me into all this stuff, and Aerosmith. I was like all in on Motorhead, right? So they're coming to Chicago on the Iron Fist tour, and we don't know what's happening. Well, a week before Fast Eddie Clarke leaves the band, we go to see Motorhead. They have the bomber rig. They don't even turn it on. And Motorhead has Brian Robertson from Thin Lizzy play lead guitar, and they play a half hour, and we were pissed. So we find out all the backstory that she had something to do with it, apparently, when that pissed off Fast Eddie. But it was like, when you read Martin's book on Motorhead, you find out that Fast Eddie was doing a lot of the heavy lifting on the business side. But he comes out with Fastway, which is just an amazing album. And there's a lot of Motorhead-esque riffs in there, but it's straight on rock and roll. And I love that. I love Eddie Kramer's production, contrary to what other people on the Contrarians think. I'm a geek for Eddie Kramer. That's another episode. But yeah, Fastway I love. Motorhead's not a huge band, but I guess if you see all the people wearing their T-shirts, you can consider them a huge band. But yeah, Fast Eddie leading Motorhead was definitely up there. But David Lee Roth was like, headline news at the time. Yeah.
I was not privileged to see them on tour at that time, but I will say I love Another Perfect Day. I love that album.
Yeah.
It may be my contrarian pick of best Motorhead album, but I also love all the Phil Campbell era albums too. So
I agree 100% Another Perfect Day, and I continued to listen to Motorhead. But that what kicked our butts was seeing that concert and being, they didn't even light up the bomber rig. It was just sitting there. The lights weren't even done. And they only played a half hour because Brian Robertson didn't even learn the songs. So
yeah,
he had some substance abuse problems too, Brian and Phil, and that whole Thin Lizzy thing. It was pretty polluted. It's funny that you mentioned Motorhead, because I was thinking Lemmy left Hawkwind, but they weren't that big, and then started Motorhead from a song that Hawkwind did that Lemmy wrote called Motorhead. It's just the craziest thing, because
the quote,
all of a sudden the sound from Hawkwind to Motorhead is just like
night and day.
Something's missing. What's missing is the synthesizers.
The Lemmy quote I always go back to, though, is in his book, he states that he made more money off of Mama, I'm Coming Home than he did his entire Hawkwind and Motorhead career off that one song.
I believe that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I thought
That song was
a-
huge.
I thought that was a Motley Crue song.
No, it's
Ozzy, yeah. And Lemmy
Oh,
co-wrote
I got-
several
yeah,
songs
yeah,
with
yeah,
Ozzy.
You're right. Yeah.
He also
Not
co-wrote
written by-
Hellraiser.
Yeah, it's
The-
written
the
by
name Home-
Lemmy and his wife.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, speaking of an artist and his wife, here's my second pick.
Yeah, that's a good pick.
Well, he left a big band, didn't he?
Kind of.
Maybe. I think I've never really heard of him.
I think this album, of all the stuff that McCartney has done since leaving the Beatles,
Mhm.
is an absolute masterpiece. This is so good. And I think Linda contributes really incredible vocals on this,
Right.
because you can hear her singing through everything, pretty much. But there's songs on here like the second side towards the end, Long-Haired Lady and Backseat of My Car. Oh my God, is this guy listening to Brian Wilson or what? I mean, it's
Well,
like,
don't forget his favorite album's Pet Sounds.
there you go. And his favorite song is God Only Knows. But I just absolutely adore this record. It's a shitty kind of one-page book, you know. But there's this little picture on the back that a lot of people don't ever talk about.
Oh, the bug, the beetle.
Yeah, and they're having sex. So it's like, screw the Beatles. Did anybody put that
Wow.
together? I don't think I was just me. But anyways, I love every song on here. To me, Too Many People, I don't care if it's a dig at John Lennon or not. It's a great song.
That's right. So.
What's the guy's name? Hugh McCracken plays a guitar solo on that thing. That's just fantastic. And this is really where Wings gets its birth, I think, because the original Wings album doesn't come even close to this. Wildlife is good, but this is a masterpiece, and Wildlife isn't. But anyways, I can't rave about Ram enough. I just think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a 5-star album. I mean, Wildlife has its own charm to it, you know. I think it's probably aged better over time, and I think people look more fondly at it now. You know.
Yeah, I mean, you can listen to any tune on there, but you know, still today, classic rock, I'll play Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey. You'll hear it, you know, nothing else off that album, but that song was huge, is huge, and it's just absolute great.
The classic rock station in Columbus, Ohio will not play that anymore. They used to play it. They don't even play it anywhere, but I happened to turn it on. And this goes to the Fastway discussion. But I turned it on one day getting in the car, and I'll be damned if they weren't playing Fastway. I
From the
went,
first
holy,
album?
what? Did we go like into a time warp? Because
Were they playing-
rock,
Were they playing
First
Say What You
album or
Will?
Second album.
off the first one. Was it Easy
Yeah,
Living?
that's the best.
It's
I'm not,
probably Say What You Will. That's I would guess, but you never know.
It might be Save What You Will. Yeah, I
See,
think it was.
that's the only song anybody who's not a heavy fan knows from Fastway. So
Yeah, it was Say What You Will. But
I can't even think of it right now, but I used to
I was
listen
totally
to it a lot.
blown away because they never play that stuff. Who plays Fastway anymore? You
Yeah,
know?
nobody.
Ozzy's Boneyard occasionally.
Ozzy's Boneyard, and that's probably about it.
occasionally.
Well,
Yeah.
Rand, that's a good choice. And I was able to rally
Oh,
because I can share something.
Cool.
Now, this band, like in 1983, I don't know what other bigger band there was probably at this point. But in 83, the Police Synchronicity came out. Sting left, though they never really announced that they had never really broken up, I guess. They never announced it. They just never got back together. And then Sting does The Dream of the Blue Turtles, and that was a big record.
That's a great record.
It got #2 on the Billboard 200 and reached #3 in the UK. But, you know, it had great, if you love somebody, set them free. Love is the Seventh Way, Fortress Around Your Heart, Russians. tons
Yeah.
of singles off of this. So,
That's,
and of
that's a
course,
great pick.
everyone knows Sting's career. You know,
And look
Yeah,
at the
that's a great pick.
look
I
at,
mean,
look at the drummer he replaced Stuart Copeland with.
Vinny.
Omar Hakim. Was it Omar Hakim?
I thought it was Vinny Colaiuta, but that might have been on
yeah.
a later album.
it is
I love Vinny
Omar.
Omar
Drum
Hakim.
Omar.
Uh-huh.
Great
Great
drummer.
drummer.
the
Yeah.
police were selling out baseball stadiums,
And
then
they
all of
just,
a sudden-
that was it.
yeah.
About
there's-
15 years ago, I saw a drum clinic with Omar Hakim, and it was absolutely
Awesome. Well, there's-
fantastic.
There's parts of that album, The Dream of the Blue Turtles, that sound like jazz.
Well, yeah, the whole band's, jazz
The
music.
jazz band, really.
Daryl Jones, Kenny Kirkland, Branford Marsalis. I mean, the saxophone on that
Right,
album's
right. Oh,
killer.
man.
Mhm.
But what a great album to follow. I like the Police much better than I like any of Sting's material. But there's some great Sting tracks. I mean, come on, the guys.
Well, they
still
did get
down
together
the
for
way.
that live reunion, but it was a disaster.
So a question to the panel is, when these big names make a move, like, is it money? Is it musical differences? I always think it comes down to money. I think
Yeah.
Sting's like, I'm not splitting my stuff three ways. I'm going all in.
Well,
myself.
I know
also-
the story behind the Police is that they always knew they only had Sting for a little amount of time because they recognized how far ahead the guy was.
Yeah, and I remember
Very
my cousin.
prolific, killer musician. And they thought, well, we're just going to ride the wave as long as we've got him,
I
And he
remember my
made-
cousin was a huge
He made
police
2
fan, and he-
movies too. I'm sorry, Joe.
No, I remember him saying, this was, I wasn't as much in the Police, but I remember he's saying, like, the whole band is Sting. Then a couple years later, he leaves.
Well, he wrote
Which-
everything,
Yeah, yeah.
they knew
Well,
what
like
they
I said,
had.
He made 2 movies too. So
But like,
you just-
so Reed, like, was Bruce? That book is great, by the way. I'm glad you brought that up. Bruce leaving was it money? I think Dokken breaking up was definitely.
Well.
According to what George Lynch and the other guys say, the whole dysfunctional thing was like kind of overdone because every band has that, and it was more money. They weren't making any money.
Yeah. Well, with Bruce specifically now, and because I've read his book and some other stuff about it, I think you can say it was categorically not the money, because going solo bankrupted him for all intents and purposes. He financed 2 albums out of his own pocket. And by the time he was through, he was basically broke. So, and then his next album came out and it was a failure. So he was making, if he didn't have money coming in from the Iron Maiden residuals, he'd have had nothing.
Yeah.
And of course, now he's a successful businessman and he's got that fat Maiden cash rolling in again. But I think certainly some artists are going to do it literally for the art, because they say, look, in this situation, I'm simply not able to do what I want to do. And, Bruce, while I think a lot of people associate Iron Maiden kind of indelibly with Bruce is Steve Harris's band.
Right.
So Maiden is Steve Harris's band. So if Bruce wanted to do something radical, he had to leave. He had no choice. Adrian Belew thought he was going to reform King Crimson. And then he was rather forcibly reminded that Crimson is Robert Fripp's band. And if Fripp doesn't want to do what you want to do, you're out.
Now,
So
back
Yeah,
to I was just thinking about the Van Halen thing. So you read Noel Monk's book and
Mhm.
a little bit of Sammy Hagar.
Mhm.
I think that was all too much cocaine, and they were just whacked out of their minds. And
there's probably something to that too.
yeah, and I'm sure Dave, with that going on, saying, "Hey, I could be even bigger than this band."
What
Yeah.
about
You have to wonder if there isn't somebody whispering in his ear, hey, you're the reason that this band is so big. Why don't you go solo? Which if you're a singer, if you're the front man, it's so much easier to go solo than if you're the drummer or the bass player, right?
Mhm. I was curious, what about Fish? Why did he leave Marillion? I heard something like, I don't know, whether too much alcohol, too many drugs. I don't know why he
listen
left.
to Clutching at Straws and you'll probably figure it out.
That's fair enough.
That whole album's about him being an alcoholic.
Ah,
But he could still be an alcoholic as a solo
he-
act.
you
I'm
know,
just curious
There
what the
comes a point where the rest of the band just goes, "Hey, man," like Black Sabbath had to do with Ozzy after Never Say Die. They just said, "It's not working. You got to go."
well, did they
gotta get
fire
cleaned
him?
up.
Did they fire
Well,
him?
Oh yeah, they
And I
wouldn't
think-
work with them anymore.
I think some
depends on who
guys
you ask.
can't take
It
ego.
depends upon who you ask. There you go.
Like I just think that some guys, their personalities, when they get to a certain point and they're drunk all the time, they just feel that they're bigger than anything else. And
Like, so, like, but Black Sabbath,
Ozzy was doing insane things though. He
yeah,
was
but Black Sabbath's the
absolutely
opposite.
crazy.
Black Sabbath's the opposite of this topic. They were,
Yeah.
yeah.
it's true.
So they had it. Both sides had to do something. They were
Right.
way down. So
Yeah.
this-
And I-
this one,
And I
bands-
think Diary of, well, Diary of Man Man is probably my favorite Ozzy album, but I think Blizzard of Oz is great.
Definitely
It's
good.
amazing that,
Well,
I think
yeah.
it's amazing how well Ed did, considering how they said they couldn't work with him after Never Say Die tour. So, I don't know.
Mm.
I'm contrarian on Ozzy's catalog, so I'm just going to leave it there. But I do have a few. Joe, if you want to throw down on some Ozzy, we can do that sometime.
I want
I,
to throw down Ozzy, and I want to have you on and throw down some Pantera.
All
There
right,
you go.
Right.
I'll do both of those.
All right.
I have a few honorable mentions.
Yeah, you're good. We got 10 minutes.
So I said I didn't want to go too obvious. The very first one that came to mind. Sorry, didn't have my prop out. I
okay.
particularly love this album cover from Mr. Alice Cooper. That's the cover of Alice Cooper Goes to Hell, which I actually like better than Welcome to My Nightmare. I may be a little contrarian on that, but talk about, Billion Dollar Babies was the #1 album in the country for a while. I don't know how long, but nonetheless, it was a #1 album. And then Muscle of Love only, air quotes, went to #10 and was considered a commercial disappointment. And then
Yeah, I hated that.
they never really officially broke up at that point. They were just like, well, let's do some solo stuff. And then, Alice was successful enough as a solo act. Plus, go back to the point, never join a band where it's named after one of the members, even if one of the members has to change his name to be that. And then I don't think you can really discuss this topic without talking about one Richie Blackmore.
Yes.
Things happened so quickly in the 70s. So I was just watching the California Jam on Amazon Prime. And as I was watching that, I thought, you know what? This is 1974. Like Machine Head just came out. And then they just came out with not Stormbird, but with Burn. I bet a lot of people in the audience had no idea that Richie Blackmore had left. Blackmore is still in. Ian Gillan is gone at that point. Because you just couldn't get information that fast. So it took a while for reality to catch up, right? But I love Rainbow. I even love the Joe Lynn Turner era of Rainbow. And then, of course, he rejoins Purple, and then he leaves Purple. And I think with Blackmore, it is definitely a case of musical differences, but probably exacerbated by money. Everything is made worse by money. And then my last honorable mention, one Rob Halford, who leaves Judas Priest and joins an existing low rent. I'm sorry, Fight, but you were not a well-known band. They were nobody in the metal scene. And
I've never
Rob
heard
Halford,
I've
Rob
never
Halford
heard it
hooks up with them, and just that first album, War of Words, is a killer album. And then Rob Halford has an interesting cycle where every other album he puts out is good. War of Words gets people noticing. There are some videos. You hear some songs occasionally on things that played heavy metal. He had the track Into the Pit, got played on hard rock radio. A Little Crazy, that's the song that actually made it on radio. But War of Words got some notice. They put out a second album, Small Deadly Space. It went nowhere. Rob is out.
That album, though.
Um,
I actually love that album.
do you?
Yeah.
I
And also
couldn't get
Russ,
into it.
Russ from Steel Panthers on the first Fight album. As the
Yes,
crowd.
Russ
Yeah.
was in Fight. That's exactly correct.
Yeah.
Fight was a great band, but they were no one.
Right.
And then Rob hooks up with John Lowry, aka John 5, and he puts
I
out
love
two.
that album too.
It's light industrial, kind of Nine Inch Nails sounding. I think it's a great album. It is not what the market wanted, one and done. And then Rob comes out with, for me, one of the best heavy metal comeback albums since Accident and Birth. And that, of course, is Resurrection. Resurrection's a fantastic album. Killer guitars, Rob's screaming his head off. I got to see that band live a couple of times. They were fantastic. And then he comes out with Crucible, and Crucible doesn't do so well. And I think he's got 4 albums out now with that unit, because he also did a Christmas album, the name of which escapes me, Winter Songs or something like that. Pardon me. And yet another album whose name escapes me, and they were pretty generic. But Resurrection was a fantastic album. So Rob intermittently put out great music. But what I love about Rob Halford is, kind of like Bruce Dickinson, Rob is searching, right? Fight is a very different thing than Judas Priest. It's very aggressive. It's very underground. 2 is industrial. Couldn't be further away from a Judas Priest type sound. But then he comes out just like Bruce Dickinson. He's like, you know what? Priest did a couple albums without me and they didn't do so well. I'm going to do a Priest style album and do it better than Priest. And I'll put this up against almost anything in Priest catalog for me. I love this album. Just like Accident of Birth is one of my favorite Iron Maiden albums, even though it's not an Iron Maiden album.
Hey,
Go ahead, Rand.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was waving at my wife.
Oh, well, hey.
All right.
Anybody
just
else
got
have
home from
anything to
work.
Now,
add?
just get some plugs in, or
Well,
Yeah, get
I'll
some
add
plugs
this.
in.
all right.
I've got
I'll
2
add-
more albums I can go.
Well,
Okay.
Okay.
I gotta run.
I'll do it quick.
okay.
All right.
I'll tell you what, I'll show you the cover and you guys talk about it.
Oh, John Anderson. Yeah, that's a good one.
Interesting.
But yes,
It's
it's
a-
still together though,
It's,
weren't they?
it's an acquired taste.
Yeah, but the way I read it, it was best album from a band member that left their band in their prime. And
Sure.
John Anderson hasn't been in Yes since 2004, 5, something like that. Second one is
I
Well,
thought you'd bring up Peter Gabriel.
Yeah.
yeah, this
Good
is the
choice.
first person I thought of, and I almost put up his first album because it meant more to me. Like when I started my record collection, the
Mhm.
first album I bought, I could afford one record, and I bought that. But over time, I think this 1980 album, Peter Gabriel, the third album, they call it Melted Face, but he really looks like that.
Isn't Phil Collins on that album?
Oh yeah, he does play drums on Intruder on the first song, and there are no cymbals on this record.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And that was Robert Fripp's idea, to not have any cymbals on it, because Robert Fripp's all over this thing. But I think this is one of the most progressive albums ever done. But here it is, 1980, and he is like pushing the envelope and going places that nobody ever went. And then 6 years later, he puts out So, and he talked about wanting to leave Genesis because he felt like it was part of the machinery. And he puts out Sledgehammer and becomes the biggest act on the planet for years. I mean, today on classic FM radio, if you hear a Peter Gabriel song, it's probably going to be Sledgehammer or
Yeah.
Big Time
Red Rain.
or Red Rain. Well, I love Red Rain. I think that's an awesome song, but I am sick to death and never need to hear again Sledgehammer.
In
I'm
Your
so-
Eyes was actually the biggest hit, right?
Mhm.
Great song
Well,
too.
I guess it depends on, the what do you call it, the demographics. But as far as I'm concerned, I think Sledgehammer would, put him on the map. I mean, it's like his Owner of a Lonely Heart.
But it's funny that, all the hardcore Genesis fans just go up in arms. The fact that, oh my God, they went pop or whatever,
Yeah. Well, I knew it. I
but
knew it was
look,
going to happen. I could see
look
it
at,
coming.
if you look at, so how much more pop can you get? It's the same kind of stuff that Peter
Right.
Gabriel's doing, this Genesis is doing.
But But also there's some real introspective and very emotional songs, you know, like Mercy Street
Mhm.
and Milgram's 37 is just wackadoodle.
Yeah.
And so I just think that that third album is just, if you're a progger, this is the one to get. If you're going to get one Peter Gabriel, I'd choose this one. But there's nothing wrong with his first one. I don't like his second one. I don't think Robert Fripp produced it well. It's very tinny sounding. There's hardly any bass. It has no body to it. It's real, I don't know. It's awful. But Bob Ezrin produced the first one, and that's amazing.
It's got really good sound.
And this was produced by a guy named Steve Lillywhite. He knows what he's doing too.
Yeah, I love Steve's work. I've been listening to that first Big Country album. Holy crap, is that a
Right. And
masterpiece.
I made a mistake on the guitar and you corrected me. Good call.
Yeah, he plays a Yamaha on that.
I know,
But
I don't know why.
that
it's so
first
much
Big
Paul.
Country album, absolutely fabulous.
But they do try
It
to
is.
sound like bagpipes on that song, on the
Mhm.
title cut. Because I remember that got airplay on MTV like every day for weeks. They couldn't stop playing it. It was like, this is the big country.
Mhm.
But I always liked Stuart Adamson, is that his name? His guitar work.
Mhm.
Good God. That guy's
Yeah, it's
good.
very good. The guitars on that are great.
But you get good sustain out of a Yamaha SG 2000.
Well, I
Those
mean,
things
it's like a Les Paul, but
Yeah, they weigh like 15 pounds. They're heavy.
oh, they
We,
were built like tanks too.
They
We
are.
lost Joe.
Yeah, he had to
Lost
go.
Yeah, Joe had to go.
Well, we need to wrap this dog up. So,
Yeah, this is an hour.
anybody have anything to plug before we go?
Nope.
I did a
Not
new
me.
tune. I did a new tune today on my on my YouTube channel called Rand Anthony Kelly. I did something called Welcome to Sitar Wednesday.
I know I
wanna
saw
check
some
that
of it,
If you want to check that out.
but you're
it's
using an
pretty-
effects pedal. You're not using the
No,
damn.
I'm using the Line 6 Variax.
Yeah.
And I did run it through a Digitech Mosaic so I could get a 12-string sound out of a sitar. I'm
Mhm.
always doing weird things like that. But that's
Well,
all
you
I
know-
did. I didn't use any other effects. I
It
have a
sounded good.
Rapish sitar pedal I could have used to make it really crazy, and I might do that later. But I just wanted to keep it kind of basic.
Right.
And it tried to sound like Ravi Shankar on a Line 6. It's actually a Yamaha Pacifica, that guitar. It's a nice guitar.
Yeah, all the Yamaha. Is it a Japanese Yamaha?
No, it's made in Malaysia or something.
Mm.
There's a Yamaha right there.
What is that? Oh yeah, yeah. You ever watch Produce Like a Pro? That YouTube show, Produce Like a Pro.
I
Yep.
think I've seen it a couple of times.
He's got one of those, and he does like a mini review. What's the model of that Yamaha? I forget.
It's a Rev Star.
Rev
He does
Star,
like
yeah.
a review, and he thinks for the price range that they're in, they're absolutely wonderful.
They're
Does
astounding.
that have soap bar pickups? Oh, this P90s?
P90s.
Yep.
Yeah. There
Mm.
you go.
It's got a chambered body, 2 P90s, 5-way switch, and an internal transformer which boosts the output passively. They're pretty amazing engineering in it.
Yamaha stuff's great. It's always
I-
been great though.
I recently bought
We're-
a young.
We are so
I
far off
recently
the
bought-
rails
we're
on
off
this
the-
one.
Let's wrap this dog up.
We-
I want to thank, because we
Okay.
could just do this. This is how things end up.
Yeah.
So I want to,
We may want to trim this one just a little bit
well,
before
we'll
we
let
finish.
Marco do that. So I want to thank the panel tonight. Joe had to head out, but I want to thank Rand Kelly, Reed Little, and Uncle Meat for joining me
Thank you.
today.
Yeah,
What a
thank
great
you.
for inviting
topic.
me.
What a great discussion.
It
So
was good.
please like, subscribe, check out the Patreon for Contrarians. There's tons of content. And I appreciate everyone coming on, and hey, have a good evening.
All right.
On
Stay
time.
rock.
Bye.